everybody. Welcome to iCast Guidance, your weekly Dungeons and Dragons and TTRPG podcast, where every week, Rich, Garret, and I pick up a subject around the culture of gaming and discuss it with you. So, without further ado, sharpen up those daggers. We're going to get started right now. All right, you guys. Welcome to the podcast. It's good to see both of you. We've had a hell of a week.
Yeah. The pit was a wild success.
I thought the pit was really good. I thought we met some new challenges, but
I think it was one of our friendliest games ever.
Really?
Yeah, I think we got along the best, actually.
I know there's so much sarcasm in that.
But it was a lot of fun, I'll say.
It was. It ran longer than I expected. We were tired. And I will say, I think we learned a lot about, here's the thing is when you dive into something new, there's so many things you don't know, you can't expect, right? And then they come into play. And when you're live streaming, it's like, how do you deal with this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we did okay. We did okay. I think we've learned, we got to make some adjustments to the game, pare it down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But
we'll be back.
We will.
That's a threat and a promise.
But I mean, yeah, seriously. But like that was our play test.
It really was a play test. And I think we have several more play tests to do.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. But I'm really excited for what this is going to become.
I think it's going to be good. I don't think anyone else is doing this.
And it really scratched the itch, like we all said, because our campaign is so story driven that like sometimes we're like, I need to fight.
Right.
That really got it out.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I feel like the mini aspect of this, like I kind of want to get camera angles better, like the physical presentation of what we're showing to people. Yeah, we need dice cams.
So bad.
I know.
We need to I have my phone.
Yeah.
That we can use as another camera.
I broke my phone this week again.
Oh,
I'm in big trouble phone wise.
It's his first day alive, apparently.
Which, brings into effect our topic for today, because our topic today is going to be time. And currently, if I could time travel, I would change a few things this week.
I would have bet on the Eagles.
Wow.
Well, yeah, you would have been the only one.
Time travel, baby. Yeah.
So we're talking about how to incorporate time travel into your game this week, and talking about how, first of all, we'll probably start the conversation on some of our favorite examples of time travel in film and books, and how those things can sort of play into a game. Because you know me, I love to bring literature and film into how I write my stories and how I world build. But I'm curious to hear from both of you as well. And then we're going to jump into ways in which time travel philosophies and paradoxes can sort of either present problems or interesting story things to solve for you. So I think it's going to be a great topic today.
So when we go into these examples, are we talking about like the rules that this time travel presents in this film or whatever?
Well, I think we would, but I also think this is an opportunity for us to give advice on how we've used it and where we can, give our listeners something to work with.
No, I'm not saying the overall podcast. I'm saying when we bring up these examples. Are we just talking about like the rules that they present in this media of time travel?
I think you can do whatever you want. Like what was interesting to you and why?
I mean, I am always going to go to Doctor Who.
Ugh.
Shut the fuck up, Rich. Every single time. I mean, I've watched Doctor Who since I was 8. I was literally thinking about the episode where like the main character, the doctor, like he changes from being played by Matt Smith to Peter Capaldi, which was in 2013, which was 12 years ago. And I nearly shat myself thinking about that.
I didn't know Matt Smith played him that long ago.
Matt Smith did play him that long ago.
Wow.
And Peter Capaldi started that long ago. If you don't know Doctor Who, it's a great show. Please watch it. Essentially what it is there's this really smart, kind of immortal time traveler called the Doctor, who has a time machine in the shape of like a phone booth. And they travel all throughout space and time and end up in all these certain different types of scrapes in every single episode. And so the Doctor usually has a companion with him. There's not so much like there are season-long arcs, but each episode is its own little adventure.
Yeah.
But the time travel is like a central mechanic to it. It's the act of being able to jump from one place to the other. Like you can be in the 1800s next episode, and you could be at the end of the universe in the next episode. And it's the time travel aspect that gives it that much flexibility to do whatever the fuck it wants and still create amazing, cohesive stories that can span a whole season.
It's interesting. It sounds like the time travel aspect is used in this show as punctuation.
Absolutely.
So it's like, all right, this is the beginning of the episode, and all right, this is the end of the episode.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of what it stands for. And it's the transitions in between and the freedom to structure the show to be whatever. So how do they use it? Do they just go to random places, or is it contextualized?
It is sort of contextualized and it is sort of random. What I didn't tell you is that the time machine he has called the TARDIS is sort of sentient. And so sometimes it's a matter of this machine senses that like I should put the Doctor and the TARDIS here because someone is in need of help. Or sometimes it will be like the Doctor's like, let's go here. And then something happens to be happening. Sometimes it is from like a longer overarching like story. Mm-hmm. One of my favorites, how they incorporate this into sort of like what feels like a very randomized like episode to episode basis, is the character Riversong, who you meet in season 4, and you've never met her before, but she seems to know all about the Doctor. And she's like, how have you been? Like, let's compare notes. Have we done this yet? Have we done this yet? Have we done this yet? Do you remember this? And the Doctor's like, I don't know. And spoiler warning, if you want to skip ahead like 5 minutes, Riversong dies at the end of that episode in season 4. And from season 4 all the way through the end of season 9, every time the Doctor meets Riversong, Riversong knows the Doctor less and the Doctor knows Riversong more.
Weird.
That's so
weird.
Interesting.
Weird. And the relationship is so fucking complex and beautiful. And the last time you see her is actually immediately before she goes and sees the Doctor from season 4.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is one of the things I love about how we're going to turn this conversation into something about game mechanics, because, you know, like so let me jump to one. This is not the one I was going to bring up for one of my favorite time travel examples in film, but you're making me think of Memento, right? And so the Christopher Nolan movie Memento is I don't know if it's similar because I have not seen what you're talking about in Doctor Who, but the mechanics, or I should say the form of that movie, the editing form of that movie is brilliant, because anything that is color in that movie, I won't say is jumping backwards, but what happens is it starts at the end and does like the last 15 minutes of the movie first at the beginning of the movie. And when you get to the end, now it jumps back 30 minutes and goes forward 15 up to where you started at the beginning. Then it jumps back 45 minutes and it comes up to where you began at the 30. And so if you could draw this as a graph, take a timeline, an XY or an X-axis timeline, mark it off in segments and put the end at the beginning, move forward and then jump backwards, move forward, then jump backwards. It's brilliant. And what it does, let's talk about this in terms of gameplay. What it does is it sets up, number one, a pattern of consistent time, but not one we're used to.
Right.
And it creates narratives or situations inside of a narrative that require adjustment, which I think in terms of a game could be phenomenal.
Right.
Well, yeah. And it's even as far as like storytelling, right? Non-linear storytelling allows the ability to set things up and have them deliver very powerfully if you use it right. Like you were saying, like with how Riversong's story finishes, right? Like, that wouldn't have hit so hard if you didn't see them come that way in like the first time they came to the show.
Right.
You know, like, so yeah, it really allows you to set things up like that.
Right. And I mean, I think what we're getting to is, you know, you think about like incorporating time travel in TTRPGs. You're thinking like, okay, how am I even going to allow my players to time travel? But time travel doesn't have to be something that they're unable to do. Time travel can be something that happens to them.
Yeah, right. Well, we always assume that, because the first question is, will time travel ever be possible? And we're like, well, we need to build a time machine. And so, but in our games, we don't need it to be like that.
Right.
And
No.
in other modes of storytelling, we don't need it to be like that, because the most cliched version of time travel in storytelling is the flashback. Right. So we know that everything kind of wisps away into the memory, and we see something that we otherwise might not have access to in our linear timeline, Rich, like you were talking about. Do you have an example of one you like?
Yeah, I'll take this opportunity to talk about my favorite movie, About Time. It's a sweet little movie, and the mechanics of time travel are pretty simple, but they have some nice consequences. This character, the main character,
Wait, what's the movie called?
it's called About Time.
Oh, wait, I thought you were. You said it, but I didn't realize that was the title. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
Go ahead.
So like there's this family, and all the men in the family possess the ability to time travel, but they can only go to where they've been before in their life, to like a moment they've already lived. So they could just go back, basically. So the movie is beautiful, and it structures like as this character becoming 18 and realizing he has the ability to do this, and learning what that means for his life, and like how time functions and how it's valuable and where he wants to use it. But there are consequences after you can do this unlimited amount of times up until you have your first child, and then you can't time travel before they were conceived again, because that would change the child that is produced.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
So you can't. So like having a kid is like a blocker there.
Yeah.
So it adds consequences, and it adds stakes to the film, because there are moments where like he wanted to go back and change something bad that would have happened to his sister, but he couldn't go back because he had a child. And he's like, oh, I have to like accept this thing is going to happen. Or moments where like his father got sick and was about to pass away, and his wife is like, oh. He passes away, and the wife's like, I want to have another kid. And he's like, I didn't really have to process the loss of my father, because I can go back and see him all the time. And he knows it. So we could just talk about it all the time.
Wait, does she know that he can
No.
time travel? Oh, wow.
So like it's heartbreaking, because he has to literally make the choice.
Wow.
And then like he goes back to play table tennis with his father, and he has a look in his face, and the father's like, you're having another kid, aren't you?
Oh, my God.
Because the father knows he already died.
Oh,
They talked about it a bunch.
Yeah.
So, and it's this beautiful moment. My favorite moment of the film, I'm about to cry right now. It makes me cry every time.
Yeah.
The father's like, you want to break some rules as long as we don't like do anything differently? And they go back to like a memory of like him as a child and them like playing on the beach together. The father brings him back with him, and they like have that moment together.
Oh, my God.
And
Wow.
they say goodbye for the last time, like as him as a child. And
Wow.
yeah, it's beautiful.
Oh,
Wow.
I love that.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
You guys should watch the movie.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Wow.
But like I said, that adds consequences are beautiful with time travel when it comes to bringing that to TTRPG.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, we were kind of exploring our favorite movies in this. And, another one, like I'm going to try and get off this emotional moment for a minute.
Yeah.
Thinking about this. But, and you're talking about consequences, right? So I'll go to one of my favorites. And of course, in order to talk about why these are our favorites, I think we do have to spoil them a little bit.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're out there listening and these are movies you want to see and haven't, realize we might accidentally spoil parts of these. I won't spoil the ending of this, but one of my favorite movies is Primer. It was a super low budget film made on like $7,000. I forget. It's really cheaply made, but one of the most complicated films about time ever made. And so basically the basic gist of this is these four tech bros who work for some company who on their off hours are sitting around this guy's house trying to run their own side business. And they make chipboards or something like that, and they ship them out. But they are actively working on a piece of technology that will change the weight of an item for shipping. And so they're dealing with like molecular structures. They're very tech savvy. They've got all this machinery in the garage, and they're testing this equipment. And at one point, this highly charged energy generator, they fire it up to see if it's going to work one night, two of them out of the four, and it does something unexpected. And so what one of them does is he takes a bunch of the little holes that get punched out of like a hole puncher, like the little circles, and he throws them into the middle of this area where this energy has been generated, and they just float. and it's pretty magical. They realize something's going on. This thing is cyclically creating its own energy field without a power source. And they're fascinated by this for a moment. And for a second, one of the characters takes his hand and just reaches in and touches the pieces of paper in there. He sticks his hand in to see what it feels like. What they did was they inadvertently created a time travel machine, but they didn't realize it. And in that energy field was a warp in time. And when he stuck his hand in there, he unknowingly changed the timeline his hand was on versus the timeline his brain was on, only for a second. But what you notice throughout the film, and they never ever talk about it, is that his handwriting is getting worse and worse and worse. And that's because his ability to think and move his hand in sync have changed.
Wow.
And
That's awesome.
You see this happening, and he can't figure out why his handwriting's getting so bad.
Yeah.
And then you realize what did it. It's freaking phenomenal.
Holy shit.
So there's a consequence of a very small form of time travel, not the cliched big one that we're talking about, but a small form of time travel that changes something minimally. So it's like, now how can we take our games and our world building and maybe have an element of time travel that does something very, very different,
right?
Rather than allowing us to go back and change the past.
Right.
So being unique kind of with your consequences when it comes to time travel.
Yeah.
I think would make your game feel really different and unique.
Right.
All right. So if we're going to talk about how time travel can affect the game, I'm going to bring up a quick campaign that I ran a while back that when I built this world, I borrowed from a story by author Jorge Luis Borges. And I can't remember the name of the story now, but the basic gist is based around Einstein's theory of relativity. So let me kind of like try and sum this up so I can make it simple. In Einstein's theory of relativity, we know that the faster we travel, the more time slows down for the person doing the traveling. And so if you were to travel at the speed of light out towards the Andromeda galaxy, not only would time shrink for you, but space would shrink as well. And so the distance to the Andromeda galaxy could probably be crossed in a matter of, let's say minutes, just for the sake of it. I don't know exactly how long it would be. But then when you returned, a million years would have passed on Earth because you're moving at the speed of light or near it. So, okay. So in the story by Borges that I borrowed from, we have people that recognize this. Now imagine for a minute you are standing on the surface of the Earth. You are standing, let's say at sea level. You're at the beach. Your distance from the core of the Earth and your head as it rotates around the orbit of the Earth is moving at a particular speed. So just imagine for a minute your head standing at sea level, right? And the Earth is rotating. It's moving at a particular speed because it's covering a certain distance. That distance is the circumference of the Earth as it spins. Okay. So that's the distance we're covering if you changed it to miles per hour. Now imagine you're standing on the top of Mount Everest and your head is now a greater distance from the center of that revolving sphere, which means it's covering a greater distance in the same amount of time, which means effectively you're traveling faster. Okay. So
you're aging slower.
In theory, yes, you're aging slower. So in my campaign that I built, the idea was that civilization realized this. And the wealthy, anyone who had money or power, wanted to live as high off the surface of the Earth as possible so they would effectively live longer. And so at the highest mountain peak, a small civilization was created where the wealthy lived inside of these massive towers. And the towers were built as high in the sky as physics would allow them to be, so that anyone living at the top of the tower could in turn be immortal. Not immortal, but live
close to it.
No, not even. They might live 3 minutes longer than the average person living at the center, right? Or even worse, imagine you're a Duragar and you live deep in the Earth and you're so much closer to the core. Days are going to go by much faster because your circumference is effectively much smaller.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the structure that's set up and the political tension that's set up. Now, of course, the one person who understood this in theory and spread this word and created this cult of religion wanted more because the tower was only so tall and he could only live so much longer and he wanted more. And so what he did was he tapped into, through a massive tunnel that went to the core of the Earth, the gravitational field, the magnetic field of the planet itself. And he tried to channel that energy to slow time further. So anyway, long story short, without getting too far into my campaign, this whole campaign was built around this notion that time moved at different rates for different beings. And there were certain people that had harnessed that time in a much greater way. So you get the basic point of this. Time was not something that they sort of had a choice in this, but that choice was based on the economics of their situation, number one. And number two, there were areas in the game that the party came in contact with where that power, that magnetic field, the gravitational field had been harnessed. Mm. And so at one point they see this room deep underground where they look into this round room. There is this column of energy that's clearly passing through the center of the room. And they notice that there are people near that column, but they're completely frozen. They're not moving. And as they chose to get closer to that, they realized that the people started moving. Well, what they were doing was they were getting really close to this gravitational anomaly. And they didn't realize it, but time was normalizing for them in relation to the people close to the column and slowing way down for anyone they had left behind. And so they were down there. They interacted with some people.
I remember you doing that.
Remember that?
And like the people that were outside thought they were frozen inside.
Correct.
So they're like, oh my God, my friends are frozen. What the heck?
Correct. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, when they emerged from the gravitational field, maybe 20 minutes later, 100 years had passed in the actual town that they had been adventuring in. So everything they had planned went right out the window. Everyone thought they were dead. And that's that.
And that's never finished that campaign.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember I remember hearing this a year ago when I was creating a little one shot based around time travel. And I think I've thought about it on like a monthly basis since. I'm not gonna lie. Because the idea is so elegant.
No, I kind of wish we went further in that campaign now.
Right.
Well, I think that number one, for those of you that are listening out there to this, don't be afraid to actually take that idea and run with it. I love my world building, but I love to hear what other people make of it. And number two, let's finish that. Let's do a one shot around.
I fucking love that.
That'd be cool as hell. Yeah.
Right.
Because, I mean, that's also a way that you can totally use the power of time travel to change the trajectory of your campaign in any way possible. And in a way that like discreetly gives your players that choice without being like, hey, here's a TARDIS, go choose what time you want to go to.
I think this is the big misconception we have about world building and time travel is that a lot of world builders think there has to be this device or object that is utilized in a way that could be really destructive to a potential storyline. Being a DM or a GM, managing having a time machine in your game could be hell.
I mean, okay, imagine Doctor Who, Back to the Future, Quantum Leap. Those are all things where there's a mechanic of like suddenly being somewhere else by choice, or I don't remember how Quantum Leap worked, but that doesn't matter.
I don't like the idea of my players harnessing the time travel. I like it happening to them.
Exactly.
It being out of their control, it being a mechanic, it being something.
Because it would be way too much for your character to be like, fuck it, I want to go to this random ass planet a billion years in the future, and then suddenly you have to side rail. That's like the taking a boat
and leaving the country. That's exactly what it is.
To a completely different
way too much freedom.
And it's way more accessible.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's like,
okay, but we're forgetting one thing. Time travel has consequences.
Yeah.
So if you do incorporate this mechanic into your game, then you also have to create the subsequent consequence system for them so that they do think twice about leaping a billion years into the future.
Maybe it costs a certain amount of money.
Yeah, exactly. When you want to cast a powerful spell, you need expensive components.
So if they want to go back in time, they better go kill a dragon and take the diamonds that are in his hoard or something.
Exactly. Exactly. And then you're at least prepared as the GM, knowing that, they're gathering the components for this slowly. I'm going to have to be on my game when they decide what they're going to do.
Or, maybe there's a service to go back in time and change a mistake you did in your past. But of course, there are going to be unforeseen consequences. It's kind of like
maybe
wishing
trade a life or something.
Yeah. Like, there's always a classic example of like the genie, and you wish for one thing and you get something else.
Yeah. I have an example because I'm actually currently playing the Planescape.
Great big orange head joke.
No.
No?
No, I don't know what that is.
All right.
But yeah, Nathan, I'm currently playing Planescape, the D&D setting and story. The Wheel of Time, I believe, is what it's called. Do I have time to get into that?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So it's interesting how the campaign starts is the players wake up in a kind of a mortuary on like a table, and they don't remember anything.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know who they are or anything. And there's so many questions floating around that. Did they die? Why are they here? What happens to them? But the most interesting mechanic I've seen this campaign introduce is when a player dies, they're brought back, but it's them from a different reality.
Oh.
So there's things changed about their character as they come back. So no one's ever like gone fully out of the game, but they do change and they're different. They're from a different plane of existence.
Well, that's kind of interesting because there's a whole thing I want to get into about this idea of
interdimensionality.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that actually plays in heavily here, but it makes me think of the Sixth Sense, right? Where all of a sudden now, Bruce Willis meets this kid who sees dead people everywhere. And again, spoiler alert, there's a very clear reason for that.
I've never seen it.
You've never seen it?
No.
But it's kind of a, I'm debating what to do here. I'm not stumbling over my words. I know exactly what I want to say.
Yeah, you can spoil it.
But I don't want to spoil the movie.
You can spoil it. It's been a long time. I probably should have listened to it.
All right. Again, you all heard the disclaimer at the beginning of this podcast that we spoil a bunch of things. So I'm going to spoil The Sixth Sense for you. But the reason the kid sees dead people everywhere, but Bruce Willis is talking to him, is Bruce Willis is in fact dead, but doesn't realize it, right? He's at a funeral. That's where he meets this kid. He's dead, right? And so this is sort of what you're talking about. Now, this idea of when this interdimensionality takes place and people change through their death, and we'll call it resurrection for lack of a better word. I saw this interesting game mechanic where when you die, when your character dies, the player, get this, the player levels up.
Oh.
So we have an outside of game, essentially a meta game system of levels for the players. And those players, when their character experiences death, now you can't just willy-nilly kill your characters off so you can level up. So there has to be some reasons why this happens. But the player gains a level in that the player has gained experience through their character dying. And so there are two simultaneous levels taking place.
Wow.
Character level and player level. And it introduces something really interesting here. So what are some of the benefits that a player can gain through their character dying? I think that's up to the GM.
Knowledge.
Well, yes. What not to do next time.
Yeah, right.
I won't split the party. But
don't try to grab a goblin as there's 17 other goblins pointing arrows at you.
Correct. Those things. But I think what can happen here is this could be a way to really make your game dynamic, your table dynamic, the way the camaraderie at the table exists, interesting. There can be a hierarchy. Not in any kind of bad way.
Yeah.
Right. But your status as a player increases.
That.
Yeah.
I think adding some form of progression or game mechanic to death will make people embrace it a little bit more and less afraid of it.
So, I mean, me with Circe, I'd be like level 1,000,000.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Right. I think
keep eating shit.
But the thing is imagine if the character lives on, like you just said, interdimensionally, or it comes in through. Is this what's happening here?
Yeah. So the way I've been playing it is like one of my characters ate poison food, and I just had their face drop in their bowl, and they just died. And then like they heard a noise from like the closet in the room, and then they all turned to look, and that body that had just died was gone. It disappeared, and then the player who just died is in the closet. And just like appeared there from a different dimension.
As the same character?
As the same character, but a different dimension.
So then do the attributes of the character change when they reappear?
Yeah, you can change anything about your character from a different dimension.
Oh my God. But what happens if the character commits suicide or chooses death, I should say? I mean, because this could become really unwieldy.
I think you would just tell your players you can't do that. I mean, is suicide ever really allowed in D&D unless it's really justified? Unless like we're playing Strahd and like all my friends were murdered by Strahd, and then I might jump off of his tower and kill myself. You know what I mean?
True. I haven't really encountered that, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But this is interesting because that interdimensionality and in terms of time travel is another way those two things can be sewn together. We got to take a break. But when we come back from the break, do you have more you want to tell us about?
Just 1 second.
Yeah, do it.
All right. Think about, like from like a Dark Souls or like Elden Ring perspective, think of death as respecing.
Oh my God.
Okay.
If you introduce like the interdimensional character type thing, you can just respect.
Totally.
And like maybe it's you died because you built your character wrong, and you're learning as a player to build your character better.
I'm sorry. It's like Marvel What If.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thinking something about retcon here, and I'm not sure how I want to put it, so I'm going to save that for.
No, I think I know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Let's come back to it.
Break.
I think we need to talk more about maybe consequences and maybe classic paradoxes.
Well, I think classic paradoxes in time travel for sure.
Yeah.
And then consequences definitely after the break and how we can bring those into the game.
Totes.
All right. We'll see you in a few. Hey, esteemed listeners. Listen, if you like what we're up to today and you like the content that we produce here at Wither and Bloom Studios and what we talk about on iCast Guidance, today's request is going to be a little bit different. Sometimes I'm trying to get you to subscribe. Sometimes I'm trying to get you to go over to Patreon and support us. Today, I think I'm going to just ask you to share the word. Tell people that we're out there. Tell people that this podcast exists. Tell people that Wither and Bloom Studios are putting together a good thing. I see comments on our channel all the time that we're underrated. And we really want to grow. We want to talk to more people. We love getting into a bigger community. And I feel like you all can help us do that. So do me a favor this week. Tell a friend we're out there. See if you can get someone to listen. It'd be greatly appreciated. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, we're back from the break. And, again, we're always having good conversations on the break. And I feel like we should just let this podcast run, but we do need to put the break in there. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how these things function more in a game capacity, right? And I talked about my Towers version of the one campaign I ran, but there are some other ways this can happen. So Rich, we left the break on you talking about that game you're working with, but you've only been 2 sessions in.
Yeah.
But did you have something else?
Yeah, I had another example. I was thinking like, okay, how about this? You start your campaign, right? And the big catastrophic BBEG event happens right at the beginning, and your players attempt to stop it. They really believe they can, and then they fail. And then something after they fail sends them back in time to try again and do it right this time. I thought that would be an interesting way, but it also poses the question, when is the right time to bring up time travel in your campaign? Do you do it in the middle of it? Do you do it at the end? Do you yada, yada, yada? Do you do that at the end as they're fighting? Because maybe they did fucking lose to the BBEG. Do you give them another shot and just send them back to the beginning of the campaign?
Wow. Oh, that would be a really weird throw off.
But like I said, it would be an opportunity to respec.
Yeah, that's true. And this idea of retconning to me, where you're about to totally impose a different meaning, a different storyline on the game by backing up a little bit, it's typically seen as a cheapening of the game. But I'd like to propose the idea that it could be seen as a way of making it more interesting and complex, in that, it's this idea that there are infinite number of parallel universes that run right alongside of ours, with every possible storyline playing out in every possible situation all the time. And so your scenario proposes this idea that you could jump from from one to others of those parallel storylines and say, this happened and this also happened and this happened.
So I've kind of been playing with that in our main campaign with Circe. And I actually haven't shared this with you, but I've shared this with Rich. I've been keeping a journal of these dreams that Circe has, which, I'm just going to go ahead and read one of her initial ones. So it starts: black images flash before her eyes. An army of men in a sea of red shields, helmets with red plumes. A realm where a god feeds on hope generated an infinite torment, death, and rebirth. A thing wearing the stolen faces of all the people it envied most. C:/Operation Star Siege / personnel / Ekir Wind Whisper. Endless corridors, each unrecognizable from the others. Vesper, the fears, the motion, the spirit, the music. Remy, Thrud, Thyla, Branmort, screaming in agony, melting flesh, fusing to stone. Tryphon, Breck, Colin? A table wired up with sleek metal boxes and rods, and a man operating a series of pictures that move, and 6 colleagues discussing rolling dice, shouting. A bird, specifically a raven, young, still with its mother, its small black figure perched on the edge of its nest, and as it jumps off and flaps its wings in the hopes to fly, I am too. I am falling, 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 black.
Okay.
Wait, Cersei is present of
This is
us?
a dream. Yes.
But wait,
So,
can I say something first?
yes.
Can I just express how lucky I am as the DM to have players that do stuff like this on the
Yes.
side in their game? That is amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
So, all these different things are visions of different universes. Cersei is being shown something. Sort of like these windows into other places, including the very table that creates her universe.
So, okay. So I'm going to jump in as the DM here and
Yes.
kind of talk a little bit. And I'm not going to spoil too much, but I have to let a few things bubble to the surface
Yes.
in this. And for those of you that are listening and don't know our campaign, that's why I'm doing this, because I'll assume not all of you know what we're up to. However, you know, what's happening here is the DM and one of the players are simultaneously building this character through gameplay, which is obvious, and then through downtime. And when we're off and we're on Discord together chatting privately about how your backstory and present tense stuff are all building and feeding into this story.
Right.
And we're not currently or actively in your story arc in our game,
Right.
but we are very much in the background
Setting it up.
setting this character up. And what's happening with your character is she's figuring out, in terms of the present tense situation, she is figuring out some of the capabilities she'll have much further down the road.
Yes.
Because we know what they are,
Right.
but the party doesn't know what they are. And so through dreams and through sort of visions, you are having hints and bits and pieces of that. And it's starting to mysteriously unfold. And this is one of the things about game mechanics and time travel that you guys can do out there is there's a way that it doesn't have to happen during gameplay where we take the cliched version and there's the portal, there's the time machine, and you jump. No,
Right.
this can happen off game time and really become about character development both before and after.
Right.
Right. So I think that's really a beautiful thing about how between your own journaling with your character and between our interactions back and forth as DM and player, and also between what happens organically at the table, those 3 facets are sort of leaping back and forth across time moments,
Right.
and really doing a beautiful job.
I fucking love it. And the thing we've been doing with my girl Circe has a journal that she found, and it's sort of revealed that this book is written in her handwriting, and it's something that she hasn't written yet. And so mechanically, a problem with that is that this book has information on things that Circe hasn't done yet. Answers that still have answers to questions that haven't even come up yet, right? And so this sort of brings into question the bootstrap paradox, like this logical loop where if you did something and then went back in time and told yourself to do that thing, and then you in the past, you only did it because you were told by yourself to do that thing. It's kind of like who came up with the idea in the first place, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
It would be like, well, if Circe had read that this thing happens and then acts upon that information, who really came up with the idea at all? Is Circe even like expressing free will if this was something that was always going to happen? Even Doctor Who addresses this sort of question of you have a book that gives you some sort of glimpse into the future. But once you read it in a book, it can't be unread.
Well, yeah. And like to talk about both simultaneously a paradox and a thought about time, as well as how we play our game.
Right.
99.9% of all the problems we come up with in terms of time travel, like the bootstrap paradox or the grandfather paradox, are because we envision time as a line.
Right.
We think about it in terms of linearity. And because we're playing TTRPGs, we're thinking about our stories in terms of lines, beginning to end and everything that happens in between. Whereas, imagine for a moment time isn't on a line. Imagine for a minute time is in a volume. It's a volume of space, or imagine a large rectilinear container that all time exists in simultaneously. And you can traverse back and forth through that. But all events are always happening eternally at once. No longer a line. No past, no future. Only this volume of all things that exist in one spot.
It's just all these moments pressed up against each other.
Well, I will say, thinking about it like that kind of does destroy story structure and consequences and what makes a story interesting.
That's good, because that just means you're more free to do with it what you like.
But wait.
But does freedom always, look at the Marvel Universe, does freedom make things better?
Wait. But hold on. Let me just back up 1 minute and give you a different way to look at that, right? Because let's just say for a minute that what linearity is, right, is a way to organize the volume of time in, like we're talking about story structure, right? And narrative. Okay. We can place the linearity of story structure and a timeline in the box and draw a line between events, because in theory, you can't be in all, we're not omnipotent.
No, of course.
We can't be in all places at one time. So the linearity is necessary for us to move in the volume, right?
I get
that. But what I'm saying is that as we move from one event in the volume to another, it doesn't end the event that we moved from. It's still happening.
We're just moving through it.
Right.
Gotcha. And that makes sense because, making a story linear doesn't just automatically make it a good story.
Correct.
So I guess that could be said about both. Right. They could be made into good stories.
Right. So. Exactly.
It's also sort of the play on this idea that one of my very, very, very smart friends at school who studies philosophy took like a metaphysics of time travel class. And we were talking about, because I had just taken Calc 3 and she had already taken this, and we were just talking about math, and she's very interested in how math and philosophy go together. And she was talking to me and she was saying, there's this question of, am I the same human now that I was? Like, am I the same entity that I am now as I was like 20 years ago when I was born? Because all these molecules and cells in my body have been shed and are elsewhere and have been replaced by other things. I am made up of different components, but I still feel the same sense of identity. And she said, well, one of the answers to that is not to imagine humans as just a 3-dimensional entity, but to imagine a human as a 4-dimensional entity, as each 3D object from the moment you are born to the moment you are died or decomposing, stacked right next to each other in a dimension of time, along a timeline. You are the collection of all of those objects.
Right.
And so from the perspective of the 4D object, yes, you are the same individual that you were now that you were 20 years ago.
Well, I have an interesting theory that's so much less mathematical.
Yeah.
That's the exact same thing. I was talking about this last night, actually, but like, we are all still the children we were born as.
Right.
There are just different versions of us, different growths, different whatever that have been put on top of us, or something like an onion. You know what I mean? Like an onion. But at the core of us, we're all still those children.
Well, I can speak to that because as someone who is twice both of your ages.
What?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But you're old.
It said you were 20 on your Tinder.
But here's what the fuck, dude?
It said you were 20 on your on your grinder.
Great. You know what? I'm not editing that out.
Staying in.
Yeah, that's staying in.
Thank God.
But here's the thing is and especially when someone jokes around and says you're old, and I want to say, yeah, But the 4-dimensional being inside of me, the human inside of me, doesn't recognize that. I am still, I have more experiences stacked up in there and maybe more wisdom because of that. But internally, if I forget all my aches and pains, I feel like I am exactly the same person I was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that part of me hasn't changed, which is really interesting about your friend who has the philosophical question of, am I the same person I was 20 years ago? And I think, this is something I teach my students, right? Because we talk about, in the world of art, and we're talking about perception, we talk about going from a singular point, which is, let's just call it 0 dimension,
Right.
String the points together, you get a line, length, we have 1 dimension, string the lines together and we have 2 dimensions, plane, we have like length and width, string all the planes together and now we get height. And so we now have length, width, and height, 3-dimensionality, 3D. And then all of a sudden, if we stack all those objects together, how do we arrive at the 4th dimension, which is often just labeled as time,
Right.
but it's not accurate to only label it as just time, right? But here's the funny thing is a lot of my students come to the world of art education through drawing and they understand 2-dimensionality. They're very familiar with 2-dimensionality. It is their sort of go-to. It's how they got into it in the first place. And there's a whole essay by Jacques Lacan called The Mirror Stage that sort of contributes to that, about how we come to understand our physical being through images, because we don't recognize ourselves unless we look at a picture or we look in the mirror. We've only ever seen ourselves through 2 dimensions. But I'm getting way off track here. Is we have mastered the world of 2 dimensions. We can draw, we can make films, we can, we understand 2D perfectly. 3 dimensions we've also mastered because we've got architecture. We can engineer things that are just beyond strength. We can do things in the 3-dimensional world that are absolutely flawless, for lack of a better word. But we haven't mastered the 4-dimensional world, right? Because we're sort of existing in the 4-dimensional world. We are aware of it. We understand how it works to a degree. We still haven't cracked quantum mechanics yet, but we can't manipulate it like we can the 3D world and the 2D world. So our existence is kind of like the 3.5D, which is that's where we really live. And this is why I think we both simultaneously don't know if we're the same being we were 20 years ago, but at the same time, we feel like we're here, present and physical. Must be all that exists.
Right.
It's such a strange thing.
Yeah.
Bring that into your game.
Totally.
I feel like this is just going off the rails, the podcast. That's what we do.
Are we really though? Because
how are people going to use this in their TTRPG game?
True. If they're just confused as we are.
No, wait. Let me answer that. Can I try to answer that?
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to answer that because I feel like if you're a GM out there, you're a world builder and you want to populate your game with this, we just had a conversation about, we presented an idea that now all of a sudden I think can lead to can spark other things.
Right.
Right. It's sort of like, what space are your players even going to be in?
But also, it's not like we can even tell people like, hey, here's the formula you're going to follow and do this, this, and that. Like there are some pointers that we can give, but the direction that we take our conversation is a conversation that they can pick up on the other side.
Well, and
continue
use
in
as
their head.
inspiration.
Exactly.
Use as
Yes.
a jumping off point.
Yes, exactly. Because I think, we basically have 2 modes in the way we function in this podcast. One is we take an existing game or mechanic that we feel doesn't function well, and we give actual concrete ways to adjust that. And on the other side of it is we bring all kinds of stuff that charge our batteries, our creative batteries,
Right.
and we talk about them. And then we say, wait a minute, we're talking about these in the context of gameplay, even if sometimes it feels like we're a little off the rails. Because, I get excited.
Yeah.
Well, can I just say something off of what you said?
Yeah.
That might also be off the rails. So when we talked about like being that child still, right? I'm kind of making this up now, but it seems like a flow of like a river or like a little stream, right? And the source of it is you as a child, right? And as you go, it kind of like dips and turns and goes into different stages and different progressions of you. But problems arise, I think, when people try to block off that stream and pretend like they're not that thing that they used to be,
Right.
or can't accept what they used to be, or whatever. Try to some form of blockage.
So yes, exactly. And let me bring in a way in which you can do that in your game. How you can take what you just said and make it part of your game. Is we have the table play time. We have the time we come together as a group, we play for 4 hours and we say, all right, Sunday at 1, let's play. And in that time, we are engaged in one of the timelines. Okay. And that might be the linear narrative as we progress forward through our story. And then we go home, and however long you guys out there play for, maybe it's once a month, maybe it's every 2 weeks, maybe it's 3 times a week. That's awesome.
That'd be awesome.
I'd love to have that
Holy
game.
shit.
But whatever that is, in between those times, there's time to jump on Discord or jump on a text and say, all right, let's go back. And you can jump in time back or forward in terms of a character's existence and say, we're going to be functioning simultaneously. You have Sam, your character Sam has gameplay time, and your character Sam has downplay time. And we're going to be running those two narratives at the same time. Now, what that does is it creates interesting tension in the game, because your downplay time with Sam off, game done in Discord, the characters, the rest of the party is unaware of.
Right.
And that builds a layered tension and complexity to the relationships in the game.
Right.
And that's a way time can really function well.
I mean, and it also connects you more deeply to your character. I mean, I can't think of much time at all that I can sit down on the table and have a moment to Circe by herself.
Right.
I will say, fucking Circe is so much more deep as a character this season than she was in the first season.
Thank you, babe.
She's awesome. You're killing it, dude.
Thank you.
Your journey is tangible.
I love her. She's great.
I love her.
All right, listen, we got to do 3-sentence backstory.
Oh, shit.
Ah, fuck.
All right, for those of you that don't know what 3-sentence backstory is, it is where each of us takes a brief sentence and builds the backstory of a character in 3 sentences. And the 3 sentences are, where are you from? What's a significant event that happened to you in your life? And what put you on the road to adventure? So I'm going to start. Apropos of our conversation, I am from the tallest tower that exists on the highest mountain on the planet. And I have spent my days watching the horizon line and the world whip by as the clouds move through the skies. Lit.
A significant event that happened in my life was on a stormy night, as the clouds blanketed the sky and my tower peaked above the clouds. I saw the moons change their trajectory and dance with each other before continuing through the sky.
Ooh, all right.
And as the moons change their trajectory and dance with each other, the clouds began to fall just beneath our town and became level with our town. And I began a journey walking on these clouds to see where it would take me.
Oh,
Nice.
shit.
Cloudwalker. Skywalker.
No.
I had to do
It's
that.
the second time we've turned this shit to Star Wars.
Yeah.
I know. No, we always turn to Star Wars. All right, you guys, listen. Number one, thank you so much for listening. And we love having you along for the ride. Head over to YouTube, where you can find us at Wither and Bloom Studios, where you can subscribe to our channel and leave a comment about how you might use time travel in your game, or ask a question, because we will probably read those on the air. But we love hearing from all of you. So definitely go over there and comment on that. Anyway, you guys, it's a great conversation today. Thank you so much.
Hell yeah.
Thank you.
Go time.
Go time.
Hell yeah.
It's go time.
It's go time, baby.
All right, everybody. You have a great week, and we will see you next time. No pun intended. Take care.
Bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to iCast Guidance. iCast Guidance is produced by Todd Lambrix, Garret Brennan, and Rich Frohman. We drop this podcast every week, and we are looking forward to having you hang out for more. Don't forget to head on over to Wither and Bloom Studios on YouTube, follow our channel, and definitely comment on what you see there. We will probably read those on this show. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to next time.